Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Have you met any psychopaths or strange people before, X? Tell us your stories.
I reckon about 1% of people you meet are psychopaths or sociopaths. 1 in 100, maybe 150, hard to say. When you start noticing them, they're quite sincerely obvious. Next to normal people, they act entirely as mirrors, imitations of normal people. What's really interesting to figure out is if they've figured out they're different, or they just blend in as their programming tells them to. Watching them is odd. It's like they make every objectively correct decision and movement to blend in, and end up sticking out like a sore thumb. Look out for them. You'll spot them if you look.
The last time I met someone like this, he read me like a book and gave me a description of my personality, much more accurately than anyone else has ever done before. It was actually a little scary, because he saw right through me and described parts of my personality that I always hide.
Lately, I've developed an, admittedly unsavory, preoccupation with the subject, but I've also lived long enough to have my brainlet packed with appalling anecdotes. So I noticed there is one thing about psychopathy that documentaries, interview footage, viral videos, and clinical treatises on the subject can't convey. It is the uncanny IRL vibe of people who are on the level, including ones too stupid or impulsive to hatch ruinous operations, make over institutions into dungeons of misery, or accurately size up prey. Sooner or later, something always happens that tips off the alert. A slip of the mask that, intentional or not, shows hair-raising coldness under it. Not much has unfolded yet, but the heart may race with foreboding, and the struggle against panic is real. And even if it all seems peculiarly unreal, it can be for the better sometimes, since that lets you act in the moment with swift obedience to survival instincts. In this way, I narrowly avoided getting carjacked on 2 occasions. Both times I hardly felt a thing, but on the second one it felt almost like playing a scene in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, given the weird inhumanity of the guy's fake friendliness. I laugh about it now, but what else is gallows humor for but to stay sane when a brush of death is plied?
Sometimes people get the terrified, almost pleading look in their eyes after they've seen under the mask. Most get this slight gleam of caution in theirs. Some are afraid of eye contact completely. A few acknowledge it and just continue on as before.
I had an encounter back when I was attending Indiana Wesleyan University in Roseburg, Indiana. I don't know if any of you know of Roseburg, but if you don't, I don't blame you. Real shithole of a place to grow up in, honestly. Nothing to do, nobody to hang out with, nowhere to go. If it weren't for the internet, I probably would have offed myself out of boredom. You can only spend Friday night in the Church of God parking lot with your one friend, so many times before the depression starts to kick in. Either way, I guess I would be lying if I were to say that Roseburg wasn't inherently creepy. It has the kind of evil energy most middle American towns have, where the town feels dead and disingenuous, surrounded by lots of bland nature. I guess I could describe the entire town's vibe as a combination of 2 feelings. The first would be the feeling one gets when looking at a massive concrete overpass and considers how out of place it looks. Where did the cement come from? Who built it? It lacks intention or context and is very clearly a soulless construct of man. The second feeling, which makes up the town's energy, would be the unique feeling of being lost in an eerie old room as a very small child. I don't really know how to portray the feeling universally, but I personally have a memory of losing my parents at church and ending up in an ancient-looking back room which reeked of mildew. It wasn't creepy by nature, I mean it had proper windows and furniture and stuff, but something about the crappy 70s wood paneling and dankness of the environment froze my 5-year-old heart solid. The more I think about it, what makes Roseburg creepy isn't the presence of something nasty. It's the lack of anything at all. The whole place is so soulless, I can't help but feel like creepy shit is flowing in and out on a consistent basis.
I get the same feeling from tourist traps. My family always goes up to the Wisconsin Dells, and I always just get depressed as hell when I see all the boring gray, punctuated only by the cold, bright streetlights and neon signs. All the cheesy ads, too. I don't really know how to describe it. I just always feel like my soul is getting sucked out of my body.
It's like someone's memory of a town, and the memory is fading.
Anyhow, enough context. Here's what happened to me. Be me, 19, fully settled into the monotony of college life at Indiana Wesleyan University. Friend I've had since grade school calls me up. Hey Anon, you down for some debauchery? I agree. There's homework to be done, but screw it, I can do it tomorrow. Friend arrives 30 minutes later. He parks on campus, and I meet him at the lot on Washington Street. We started walking without much of an idea where we were going. Friend and I crack open a beer or two, shoot the shit as we go. Eventually stop at the teppanyaki on 38th and Western, set ourselves down on a curb, talk for about an hour before my friend feels the call of nature. Friend gets up to go take a piss at the gas station across the street. I'm alone and polish off my third brew doggy. Suddenly, a sound to my right catches my attention, scaring me more than it should have. It was probably just a bottle falling over, and it was a good distance away. But as anybody who's been in a Midwestern suburban town at night knows, it gets so quiet you can hear the sound of your finger rubbing against your thumb at arm's length. So it made my heart skip a beat. My eyes lock onto the source of the sound, which is by a street lamp across the parking lot to my left. Beneath the harsh lighting stood the figure of a man, barely the height of the trash bins behind him. He's slowly making his way across the parking lot. Admittedly, since housing is cheap out here, we don't really have much of a homeless population. So the sight of a disheveled man wearing nothing but overalls in the middle of the night is definitely on the stranger end of things. It was also early November, so the temperature didn't match his bareback outfit. This was all pretty concerning, but what really froze me up was his physical appearance. Not only was he unusually short and muscled, but quite deformed. No hunchback of Notre Dame, but his head looked more like a cauliflower than a normal human skull. Plus, he seemed to be moving with great effort and pain, so in retrospect, I believe he may have also had severe arthritis. His joints looked pretty messed up and he didn't move very fast, so it makes sense, I guess. However, my fight or flight didn't kick in until he was close enough to hear his labored breathing, and I realized that he was walking straight towards me. I noped out of there and made a mad dash for the mini-mart, periodically checking over my shoulder. He was slow, so I was able to reclaim the distance he'd closed by the time I arrived. Friend was purchasing mini donuts, and it wasn't until he was rung up that he realized I wasn't screwing with him. Anon, what the hell are you talking about? No, I'm serious. There's a weird guy out there, and he started following me. Who? As soon as I described his appearance to my friend, I saw a switch flip. He gave me a long and hard glare, and his expression morphed between 3 different emotions before he was overcome with what seemed to be pure panic. He looked out the window and saw the man slowly meandering closer. He was almost across the street at this point. At the sight of this, my heart jumped into my throat, and so did my friend's, based on how quickly he grabbed his donuts and got out of Dodge. I followed him as we sprinted back to the campus parking lot. We exchanged a few "what the hell should we do's" and decided that we should just go back to my dorm and spend the night. We make it back and I lock the door and close the curtains. After we give ourselves a moment to breathe, I ask my friend what I'd been dying to understand while we were running. Why did you freak out so bad when I told you about what I saw? My friend gave me a really long stare before finally speaking his mind. Apparently there was a big playground legend which I missed, where they said that an old farmer out east sold his soul to the devil so that his wife could conceive a son. Unfortunately, as most deals with the devil are, it was screwed up since the baby was a disastrously deformed, violent mess. They tried to take care of him, but were eventually found dead, bludgeoned and stabbed with various farming implements. The legend says that he still roams the fields to this day, lurking in the dark, taking victims back into the woods to never be seen again. He said it was all horseshit and he didn't believe it. But my description of the homeless man awoke a childhood fear deep within him which compelled him to look out the window and scram. After several hours of tense conversation, our minds wandered, and the mood lifted enough for us to both fall asleep. Morning arrives, and my friend departs. We still periodically talk about it, but ultimately have written it off as just a weird encounter with a disheveled hobo. But there's still a part of me that wonders whether or not what we experienced was truly paranormal or not. That part of me is what compels me to avoid driving and walking around the east side of town at night. Anybody from the Rönnberg Swayzee area know about this legend? It's apparently kind of a big deal since a majority of the people I've talked to about it at my college have heard of it in some shape or form.
The feel when no local legends to learn about, although Bell Witch kinda counts for me.
Okay, so I talked to my friend, and yeah, same story. He heard from a guy who lived in that area about this family that owned farmland in the 40s in the eastern part of the county, just a few miles east of the gas station you described. The farming implements, the deformities, his story lined up with the story you heard, and the physical description of the homeless guy. Did you feel particularly nervous or nauseous during the encounter?
Hey there. Wow, thank you so much for reaching out. My friend and I have been at a dead end for quite some time now, so your input is appreciated. Yes, I would say I was unreasonably jumpy when it happened. In retrospect, the encounter wasn't even all that scary. And yet my friend and I haven't been that terrified before or since. Honestly, the unnatural fear we both felt towards the hobo is probably either just our sheltered asses being paranoid, or the strongest case for our encounter being of the paranormal variety.
Yeah, I'd go with the latter on that one. Part of the legend is that he carries a dark aura of fear and dread everywhere he goes. Some people even say he drove his parents to self-terminate with it, but it's admittedly a secondary trait that not all encounters confirm. Anon, I think you met the Swayzee Slasher himself.
I once met a guy who I believe was a sociopath, but a very dumb one. I attended law grad for 3 years before quitting. Too many pretentious people, very toxic workplaces, etc. And this guy was a classmate. He would try to shame and mock other males in front of beautiful girls, but he wasn't very successful at that, because almost every male in law is confident, even if ugly or poor, and doesn't fall for these kinds of traps. He once brought a gun simulacrum to uni, just because he couldn't stand that our cop classmates would have this sign of power and he wouldn't. Once he tried to intimidate me next to a girlfriend, and I just shrugged. It pissed him off so much he went home earlier. I guess his methods of manipulation didn't work with people who are used to mental and emotional pressure. Law school and our way of getting into it is mentally exhausting, at least in my country. He ended up being a joke among us, a symbol of how the average law student is viewed around here. Insignificant trash who thinks are something because of a status title. Well, another classmate, a cop, said he had a lot of traits of a crazy man who would go shooting the campus. I don't know if he was bullshitting me to get me scared, but if he was, it worked. I totally believe it's possible, because I had this evil feeling from him from day one.
Classic. Nothing cuts a psychopath like insouciance does. They want drama to star in, even as the butt of notoriety. Unfortunately, if it's a colleague, co-worker, or neighbor, you'll probably have to fall back on official channels and get out if that fails.
I was at a job corp during the early 2000s. I met plenty of them. Guy down the hall claimed to be a vampire hunter and was a werewolf. One guy in a different dorm who resembles a fat version of Prince claimed to have mystical powers. My favorite nutter was my roommate Randy. One of the staff members noticed him eating out of a dumpster and ended up helping him sign up. They moved him to my room because they knew I got along with the more eccentric students. We hit it off well, and he even gave me the nickname Unk. He would go on about Satan trying to trick him, and believed he was a character in the Left Behind series. Towards the end, he stopped eating in the cafeteria. He would go to the dumpster or the canteen because he was convinced all the women were putting cyanide in his food. I tried to reach out and get him help. Every time he would fool the doctor. Kinda miss him.
Be me, about 15 maybe younger, at Suburban Park with family. We're in a large field with a small tree line connected to houses, and hedges cover the place. Look over at the tree line and see an old woman walking through the trees and past a bush. As she does this, she looks right at me. Her eyes were blank, almost like they were there, but they weren't, if that makes any sense. She was wearing an old-fashioned skirt that was brown and dirty. She wore a purple shirt covered in flowers and had a small brown blanket over her shoulders, as well as a ragged gray hat. Walked like that old Bigfoot footage. I can't forget her for some reason, and every time I do remember her, I get chills. It's like she knew me. I haven't seen her since then, though.
It's nothing that interesting probably, but this thread reminded me of it, about 2 years ago. Working in a supermarket for some extra cash. Sitting at the cash register, it's early afternoon, summer, normal day really. Suddenly, a somewhat older man walks into the store, immediately catching my attention. The guy was white, but had this sort of an Indian vibe to him, if you know what I mean. Had long white hair, wore a bit old-fashioned and raggedy clothes, and a wide-brimmed hat. Generally seemed really preoccupied with his thoughts the whole time and kind of distant. He takes what he needs from the store and comes to the cash register after a while. I notice that he has lots of different crucifixes, rosaries, and other crosses, like at least half a dozen of chains and necklaces hanging from his neck. While waiting in the line, he starts mumbling some weird, incomprehensible shit under his nose and after a while says to me, "Don't worry, sir, I'm not crazy," even though I wasn't staring at him or anything. Buys a few mundane products, pays and leaves. This guy did look a bit like a loony, but at the same time he really had a very strong aura of knowledge and wisdom to him. Like you could really feel that this man genuinely knows something. I really regret I was at work and basically tied to the register with other customers waiting behind him. I would try to initiate a conversation otherwise.
I dated a legitimate sociopath once, I think. Had fantasies about literally killing me. I'm into Guro, so I embraced it. But I realized it was more than a fantasy for him. When I walked into his bathroom once and I found blades, knives, alcohol, and rope sitting out on the counter. Noped out of there fast as hell. He also allowed himself to fall deep into eating disorder stuff, which was kind of scary since I'm a recovering bulimic, and he tried to re-encourage my bulimic tendencies. He's so thin now that I can see his bones, and he's proud of how he typically goes 14 days without eating anything. Honestly, a total creep. Broke up with him a while back. See him in passing every now and then.
My friend's sister is a diagnosed schizophrenic. The other day she told him to make her food and he said later and all she said was, "Just do it now, scum." Something about using a word like that to someone non-joking is very powerful to me. She also poured boiling water on him as a kid. They're not mystical smart beings. They're just blatant assholes because they had the shitty roll of the dice when they were born, unfortunately. Do we have to like them or sympathize with them? Hell no.
Every person who still talks with me in real life are strange individuals. I have a theory about it. It's like my life is in some frequency similar to them. We are all in some low level of frequency, so we get attracted for some magic power. I'm always getting to know the strange persons, and I like it. It feels warm and sad, like we all are going slowly to hell and can't be saved. But we are together anyways, and that makes me smile. Everyone has their scars in the past. Somehow, a few days ago, I was thinking about this and remembered Charles Manson. He said his people were his family, and they were like kids without a place in this world, so Manson gave love to them and became a family. Such a wonderful history. I hope I can get my dark family too, and we will all jump to hell together.
Same. I'm like a freak magnet attracting all the weirdos to me all my life. You get grouped up with people to resolve certain karmic issues you all have. All my friends are just like me. Even girls I meet on dating apps turn out to be as messed up in the head as me, or even more. I kinda like it though. I don't like normies anyway.
Sounds like you just want to be happy. So you're looking for companionship anywhere you can get it. You're not alone though.
Be me, 15. Working at Hardees. Working at the front register when a tall, slim man in a black coat, greasy hair, dirty glasses comes in. He comes up to a counter and smiles. His teeth were tinged yellow and crooked. He orders, asking for gravy with his fries. This Hardees was in Montana, hours from the Canadian border. "We don't have gravy." He says that's fine, and then asks where the nearest Popeyes is. I tell him it's on the military base in town, and you need a military ID to get in. He says, "Oh, okay," and takes out his wallet to pay for the order. He attempts to hand me Canadian money. I can't take it. He shows me the Canadian coins. Going on that, this is a loonie, and this is a toonie. Okay. He gives me USD. He gets his order and leaves. 2 hours later, he's back. "Yeah, I tried to go to the Popeyes and they didn't let me in." "Well, yeah, I told you that you needed a military ID to get in." He orders a ham and cheese, gets it, and then leaves. He is the only genuinely strange person I've interacted with.
Probably just a simpleton. I genuinely feel almost overwhelming sadness whenever I encounter nice but incredibly stupid people. How in the name of God do simple folk remain kind and undefeated by the cruelty of the world? I don't know, man. I'm rambling, but I wish someone would understand what it is that I mean. Your story gave me a pang of that particular feeling. I was 18 when this happened. I and my older cousin, who was 19 at the time, were coming back from a family party, so our spirits were high even though it was 2 in the morning. On our route home, there is a very long road that is quite wide, and on both sides there are tall trees. Not something you'd call a forest, but dense enough it creates darkness on each side. However, on the left side, there is a thin strip of sidewalk, and on the right, the sidewalk is wider. So wide you could probably drive down it. We were just having a heart-to-heart talk about various things like traveling, our family, and generally what we want our future to be like. We weren't driving fast at all because we didn't really want to go home. I caught something out of the corner of my eye. Not knowing what it was, I turned to look out my window, but I couldn't see anything. In my gut, I felt something was off, and a wave of sadness came over me for no specific reason. I just felt like crying. I was about to ask my cousin if he was all right, but when I looked up, I saw a figure running from the left side of the sidewalk to the right. It scared me so much because I'd never seen anything like this before. It looked almost like a human, but I knew it couldn't be as it was extremely tall and so skinny, and its arms were long and looked to be thin. My cousin slammed on the brakes, and I knew that what I just saw he saw too. Wanting to know what it was, I looked to the right side, and I was utterly confused. A man on the right sidewalk was sitting there next to his bike. He looked at us and smiled. He was wearing cycling gear, and his bike was on the ground. I was shocked and confused. Why would he be cycling at 2 in the morning? I crawled over the console and leaned over my cousin so my face was right up to the window. I stared at the man as he smiled back at me, but his smile had changed. It was so wide and toothy he looked kind of normal, but so out of place. As I examined him more, I noticed he only had one ear, and where it should be was totally flat, but everything else was just what you'd expect a human to look like. The man stood up, and my cousin pulled me away from the window and back into my seat. He drove off so fast I didn't even have time to look through the mirrors to look back at the man. I tried to talk to my cousin about it that night and various other times, but he just snapped at me telling me to drop that topic and never to bring it up around him again. I know what I saw, but at the same time I have no clue what it is.
Not super paranormal, but be me. Biking home one night after work, it's raining and around 11 or 12 at night, I don't know exactly. Streetlight is ahead, directly next to the 4-way intersection that I turn on to go to my house, covering the sidewalk in an eerie, shadowy light, due to the tree directly next to it. There are no cars at the 4-way. It is completely desolate, with one exception: the silhouette of a man ahead of me on the sidewalk. The light makes it hard to tell any details whatsoever. He is walking silently, does not move or step to the side as I approach. His back is to me, but usually when I get within 20 feet of people on the sidewalk, they hear me and make room, so it's weird that he just keeps walking. I awkwardly slide by him on the sidewalk, and as I go up alongside him, you'd think if he hadn't heard me, he'd jump sideways or at least look to see me pass within 2 feet of him on my bike. He continues to walk as if nothing happens. My leg brushes him for a split second, and still there is no reaction. This weirds me out, and as I turn the corner, I lose sight of him, because there is a housing complex on that corner that blocks the view of the sidewalk approaching the intersection. Keep looking behind me to get a look at him as he crosses the intersection. He never crossed. I kept looking back every couple of seconds, but I never saw him cross the intersection. I was too weirded out and afraid of what I might see if I turned around. It might have just been a weird dude who stopped and stood there for a while for no reason directly after I went past him. But the fact that he never reacted even a little bit to me, and the fact that I never saw him even get to the intersection despite the fact he was right there, freaked me out.
Last summer, I had something happen to me that has left me feeling uneasy since. I live in a small town in central Arkansas. One evening after work, I had to stop at a local convenience store to get some gas for my car. A man and his son stood at the pump opposite me, and a young woman was standing by her car behind him. When the gas nozzle clicked full, I placed it back onto the pump and went inside the store to pay. When I came out, everything seemed different. There was nobody by the pumps. I had paid for my gas and walked back out in just a minute or so. But there was nobody anywhere. It was so bizarre, like I had stepped into another world.
I suddenly felt scared but didn't understand why. Then a man walked out of the wooded lot to my right. He was standing by my car at the same time I was heading towards it. When I walked by him, I noticed an awful stench coming from the man. He looked like a normal guy, not wearing dirty or old clothes. He looked like he was in his 30s or so. But when I looked at him, I felt scared. Like something bad was going to happen. I opened my car door and looked back at him. He was staring at me. The man came closer to me, kind of shuffling his feet. "I need a ride," the man told me. The way he said it was startling, like a physical force hit me right between the eyes. He then said, "Give me a ride." That is when I noticed that his eyes had changed to solid black. No whites, no nothing. It was like I was looking into the abyss. The stench was also starting to affect me. "Where do you want to go?" The man replied, "Just give me a ride and don't ask questions." I said, "No, I can't. I've got to get home." He took a few steps toward me. I immediately got into the car and closed the door. As I started the car, the man put his face up to my car door window. I felt compelled to look at him. I started to feel sick to my stomach. I put the car in gear and got the heck out of there. This has been troubling me. I've been having terrible dreams about this man almost every night since it happened. I'm almost afraid to go to sleep some nights. This is a small town. Everyone knows everyone else. But nobody has seen this man. I just don't understand what happened that night.
Be me in college. It's in the middle of nowhere and most people wear Walmart or Carhartt stuff. Me and a few friends went to a bar to get drunk. A strange man walks in. White as a ghost, looked almost dead, but still pretty handsome. Wearing very ornate boots, but not like cowboy or work boots. These looked expensive, wearing an overcoat, turtleneck, and slacks. He had a very ominous vibe about him. His eyes caught light, kind of like a dog or wild animal, so they would glow. Everyone kind of ignored him, and I'm surprised no one insulted him or something. He took off his leather gloves, and his hand looked like skin and bone. At the bar, he ordered shot after shot and paid in cash. We went outside for a smoke, and out of nowhere, he was behind us and asked us for a cigarette. Super soft-spoken voice. We gave him one. He quietly smoked it and left. The dude just gave everyone the creeps. He sat back at the bar and started chatting with the bartender and asking him about the town. Never said where he was from or talked about himself. Then he just walked out and walked to the road. It was around 0 degrees that night, and the guy wasn't really dressed for that kind of cold. Talked with the bartender, and he paid with very old cash from the 70s. Never saw him again or heard about him.
Be me. 19 alone at home. Parents working and bros all busy, so I'm bored. Check outside my house. Car consistently parking with lights on outside my home. Call him Car Goober. Big neighborhood, so I assume he isn't any harm necessarily, or at least doesn't care about me, probably a dealer or some shit. One night, Car Goober is further from my house than normal. Can't see into his windows, but he's facing directly towards one of my neighbor's home, the only house with lights on this late. Can see in the light of the street lamps he's repeatedly opening and shutting his driver's side door from the front seat while flicking his hazards. This goes on for 20 straight minutes. Or at least I checked 3 times, and he was still doing it by that amount of time on the final check. Fuck it, I'm calling the cops. The Car Goober has gone too far. I call the police and they say they'll check it out. The moment cops pull into my area, the Car Goober ceases his behavior, pulls back out of the street, drives away onto the highway. Neither me nor my parents ever saw the Car Goober again. Still think about it sometimes.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.